I just want to show you something that's on a website. And this is like in Texas, we have websites that are for Appraisal District, which is the website that you go to when you want to find out about tax on land. So this is for a particular property that's owned by someone I know. And so I've marked everything out. It's in Texas. And I guess I could have left the first part of the website here, but it's just a regular county appraisal district in Texas. Okay, so right here is what I want you to look at. Situs address. So the situs address is the indicator for what jurisdiction the address is in, because the jurisdiction tells what the government can do with your property. So for example, this is Title 26 IRS code, the situs of the property subject to lien. So it's where it is, where it's located. Now, this is kind of a weird thing because the federal government, this is a federal title, yet this is in the state. This is in a county in a state in Texas. But see, they're using TX, which is an indicator for the federal post office. It's a code for the federal post office. And then down here it would have the zip code, which is also a federal indicator for jurisdictions. Okay, and jurisdictions are situs. Situs also means situation, the position, location, site, as for jurisdiction. Now, I know you think that because this property is in Texas, that you're thinking that it's in the state and that the federal government and the state are different entities. But in this case, when you use the federal indicator and the federal zip code, you're indicating that you're on federal property, or you're under a law or subject of the federal government, and you're registering this with the federal government, which has control over the state depending on what position you say you're in. Okay, so let's take the 26 IRS code. For example, this is not a law. It's never been a law. It is not now a law. There are certain requirements that have to be met in order for Title 26 to be a law. Okay, so for Title 26 to be a law, it has to meet all those requirements, and then it's giving a positive law citation. There is no positive law citation for Title 26, meaning it was never made a law. So what do they do to get you to pay taxes? They get you to sign a piece of paper, a form, and the form is an advertisement. Here's the positive law citation. The form is an advertisement, and the advertisement is also a notice. So when you fill out the form, you're agreeing to be part of their jurisdiction. So their jurisdiction inside of Texas is called State of Texas. So the difficult part is trying to explain the state of Texas to people versus the actual place, Texas. And it may help if you think of Texas and state of Texas being two different places. And so we have the outline of the states here, and that's Texas and Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, okay, Arkansas, Louisiana, all the states. But the federal government owns some areas inside the states, and those areas are called state of Texas, but they're under federal control. So when you apply to the state of Texas to have your land situated, which is the situs, which is the jurisdiction under their control, then your state of Texas taxes are actually going to the federal government. And your federal taxes are also going to the federal government. And they have 5 different types of jurisdiction on the lands in the state, depending what kind of title they have to the land or what the use is. So, for example, Code 1 is exclusive legislative jurisdiction, where they have all authority to make all laws without state interference on the military post used for defense purposes. And then this is a little bit less jurisdiction, this is less jurisdiction, this is less jurisdiction, and then this is an unknown. And these are their codes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So code 1, jurisdiction would be exclusive, meaning no state interference. And here's where they talk about appearing in the jurisdictional code column indicates the legislative jurisdiction. Here, state statutes, they talk about state statutes and they talk about federal statutes, these are federal statutes applying to, I think, basically all the places under exclusive jurisdiction. And then state statutes are for the federal government to comply with the various other particular statutes particular to those states, those territories, those lands, Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas, not state of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. And in about 1962, they had a book, 1962, they had a book where they spoke of how they were going to keep track of all of the real estate in the state, in the land like Texas, all the federal lands, and then they would outline what type of jurisdiction they had on that land. Where we find these forms that are filled out, I do not know yet. I'm still looking. So if we look at, let's say, National Park Service Interior, this is a Federal Register paper. It's in the Federal Register, volume 79, number 66. It says, now, Department of the Interior, this is a change of jurisdiction, National Park Service units within the state of South Carolina. I'm going to read this to you and then see if you can figure out what it means. On behalf of the United States, the National Park Service accepted exclusive jurisdiction from the state of South Carolina and retroceded and relinquished to the state of South Carolina the measure of legislative jurisdiction necessary to establish concurrent jurisdiction between the United States and the state of South Carolina on certain lands administered by the National Park Service within the state of South Carolina. So they accepted exclusive jurisdiction from the state of South Carolina. They retroceded, meaning they gave some back and relinquished to South Carolina the measure of legislative jurisdiction necessary to establish concurrent jurisdiction. So it's, to me, it sounds like they're saying, we accepted exclusive legislative jurisdiction from South Carolina, and then gave some to the state of South Carolina to establish concurrent jurisdiction between the federal area in the state and the seat of government. And if I'm reading that wrong, I apologize, but that's what it sounds like to me. And this created a concurrent jurisdiction between the federal government and the federal areas in the state. And they did this on November 27, 2013. Formally accepted exclusive jurisdiction over certain lands. But see, the National Park Service is not used for defense purposes. So in reality, the Constitution says that they can only have exclusive jurisdiction over areas used for defense purposes. So I'm not sure that the state can make a contract giving more jurisdiction to the federal government than it was allowed to take, because it's not in the contract. But if the federal government is allowed to make contracts, which it says it is, then anything goes, basically, whatever the states agree to. But what states? Because the settlers are in charge of most of the lands, whereas the federal government's in charge of other lands. So my point in this is that there are some lands that the government does not control. So here on this map, we see federal public lands, surface and subsurface. So I guess that means also they have some authority or jurisdiction over tunnels or something underground, maybe oil, minerals, mineral rights, federal public land, surface and subsurface. So these red areas are the areas where the federal government owns lands, and so therefore they have jurisdiction over those areas, but that does not include this piece of property until it's registered with them. And you think the state of Texas is just Texas, but it's not, and you think you're paying state taxes, but you're not. You're paying federal taxes, and you're putting this under the jurisdiction of the federal government. And that's how the federal government is getting control of everything. And so when you file your forms to pay federal taxes and then something happens, they claim that your property, because you registered it, that your property comes under their jurisdiction, their situs, and subject to lien. That's how they put a lien on your property, even though the federal is not supposed to have control over all the state lands. That's not in the Constitution. Okay, so that's this short video. So when you're registered, and I'm not telling anybody not to register their property. I'm not telling you to go down there and tell them anything, to tell them off or anything like that. I'm simply making a point to inform you, to educate you, because knowledge is power, so that you can understand. Here, I found this in an old statute book, Public Law 91-45, Veterans Administration Center, Fort Harrison, Montana, an act to cede to the state of Montana concurrent jurisdiction with the United States over the real property comprising the Veterans Administration Center, Fort Harrison, Montana. Meaning that the state of Montana gave up some lawmaking power to the federal government. They ceded, they gave up to the state of Montana concurrent jurisdiction. So it probably had exclusive jurisdiction over this Veterans Administration Center, the federal government did, and then they gave some of that jurisdiction back to the state of Montana, therefore creating a concurrent jurisdiction where both the state of Montana and the federal government had power and authority over making the laws for this property, Veterans Administration Center, Fort Harrison. And this looks like it was July 19th, 1969. Public Law 91-45. So the lands, this concurrent jurisdiction is called a situs, giving the government, the federal government, some authority over that portion of land, which is what you did here, the situs address. And the address looks like what the federal government requires when you register your property under someone else's name, or you sell it and they register it, or you buy it and you register it, and you go down there like a dutiful citizen and you register with the state of Texas for title, and you just agreed to pay taxes and come under their authority. Okay, so that's what it means. So now you went from being a white area, free, sovereign, and independent, to a red area under the federal government, even though it may be called State of Texas. Okay, so like, share, subscribe. Go ahead and do that now, and I'll see you in the next video.